It was a chilling winter evening when police arrived at the scene of a brutal murder. The body of Tariq Khan, a middle-aged, well-respected man, lay lifeless in his luxurious living room, a knife still protruding from his chest. His son, Ahmed, was in shock, cradling his father's bloodied body, while his wife, Amina, stood silently in the corner, her face drained of color. The media quickly caught wind of the scandal, but what no one knew yet was that the tragic death was a result of a twisted web of deceit, secrets, and betrayal. An affair between Amina and her father-in-law that had spiraled out of control. The whispers began, how could a woman betray her husband with his own father? The truth, however, was even darker than anyone could imagine. As the investigation unfolded, hidden truths came to light, exposing a torrid love affair that had sparked envy, jealousy, and ultimately led to cold-blooded murder. Amina had always been a dutiful wife, or so it appeared. She had married Ahmed 4 years ago, and by all accounts their marriage seemed stable, if not unremarkable. Ahmed worked long hours as a businessman, leaving Amina at home with little to occupy her time. It was during one such evening when she was alone in the family house that her father-in-law, Tariq, came to visit. Tariq was a handsome man for his age, with a charm that hadn't faded. They exchanged polite conversation, but something about his gaze lingered a little too long. At first, it was innocent. A smile here, a fleeting touch there. The first time Amina felt a thrill was when Tariq jokingly complimented her on her cooking, saying, "Ahmed's lucky to have you. If I were younger, I'd have married you myself." They both laughed, but underneath the humor, there was something unspoken, something dangerous brewing. As weeks passed, Tariq's visits became more frequent. Amina noticed how he would find reasons to stay longer or compliment her appearance more often. His eyes would follow her as she moved around the house, and slowly, Amina began to respond in kind. She found herself wearing more makeup on the days he was expected to visit, choosing her clothes carefully, hoping to catch his eye. When they were alone, there was a growing tension between them, a silent acknowledgement of something inappropriate yet irresistible. One evening, when Ahmed was working late, Tariq arrived unexpectedly. The conversation felt charged with electricity. He stood too close, touched her arm when he didn't need to, and when their eyes met, neither of them looked away. It was the first moment Amina realized she was playing with fire, but instead of retreating, she allowed herself to feel the excitement. The flirtation escalated into something undeniable. Amina knew it was wrong, but she couldn't stop herself. There was a forbidden thrill in her interactions with Tariq that she hadn't felt with Ahmed. One evening, after a family gathering, Ahmed fell asleep early, exhausted from work. Tariq stayed behind, claiming he wanted to discuss something important with Amina. They sat close on the couch, the air thick with unspoken words. And then it happened. Tariq leaned in and kissed her. For a moment, Amina froze, but when he pulled away, she found herself wanting more. The kiss was the line they crossed, the boundary they shattered. From that moment, their meetings became secretive. When Ahmed wasn't home, Tariq would come over. They shared passionate moments in hushed whispers, knowing full well the risks, but neither could resist the pull of the affair. At first, Amina was overcome with guilt. She would return to her role as Ahmed's wife, smiling and pretending everything was normal. But inside, she felt torn between two worlds. Tariq was older, more experienced, and gave her a kind of attention that Ahmed never had. With him, she felt desired in a way that was intoxicating. But with every illicit encounter, the guilt gnawed at her. She would lie awake at night next to Ahmed, feeling like a different person. Despite her guilt, Amina couldn't stop. The passion between her and Tariq was too strong, too intense. Whenever they were alone, they couldn't keep their hands off each other. Their affair consumed them, and it was only a matter of time before the cracks began to show. Ahmed wasn't oblivious to the growing distance between him and Amina. He had noticed that his wife was more distracted, distant, and often lost in thought. She would blush at the mention of his father, and her behavior around Tariq was different. Ahmed chalked it up to stress or boredom, never suspecting the dark truth. However, Ahmed's sister, Layla, was more perceptive. She had seen the lingering looks between Amina and Tariq during family gatherings and heard the whispers between them when they thought no one was listening. Layla grew suspicious, but without proof, she kept her concerns to herself. However, she began to watch them closely, determined to uncover the secret she felt brewing just beneath the surface. Tariq and Amina's relationship became bolder. They would meet in secret at hotels, exchange text messages late into the night, and make excuses to see each other whenever possible. Their passion was fueled by the thrill of secrecy, but it was also becoming harder to conceal. One evening, after a particularly heated encounter, Tariq whispered to Amina, "I can't keep pretending anymore. This is more than just an affair." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She realized then that what had started as a dangerous game had turned into something more complicated. Tariq wasn't just using her. He had developed deep feelings for her. Amina was torn. She didn't love Ahmed the way she once had, but she wasn't sure if she loved Tariq either. The affair was spiraling out of control, and she knew it couldn't continue without dire consequences. One evening, Ahmed came home early from work. As he walked through the front door, he overheard voices from the living room. Amina and Tariq were sitting close, talking in hushed tones. Ahmed felt a surge of unease as he listened to their conversation. The words were vague but loaded with meaning. Ahmed's suspicions, which had been simmering for months, finally exploded. He didn't confront them immediately, but that night, Ahmed lay in bed, his mind racing. Something was going on between his wife and his father, and he needed to find out what. The following day, Ahmed began to secretly check Amina's phone, looking for any signs of infidelity. What he found shattered him. Messages between Tariq and Amina, filled with passion, desire, and betrayal. Ahmed couldn't contain his anger any longer. He confronted Amina, throwing the phone down in front of her and demanding an explanation. Amina, caught off guard, initially tried to deny everything, but when faced with the evidence, she broke down. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." But her tears did little to quell Ahmed's fury. Betrayed by both his wife and his father, Ahmed felt his entire world collapse. He stormed out of the house, not knowing where to turn or what to do. Meanwhile, Tariq was unaware of the confrontation brewing between his son and his lover. He continued to believe that their secret was safe, but the storm was about to break. In the days that followed, Ahmed's mind became consumed with thoughts of revenge. He couldn't bear the humiliation of knowing his wife had been unfaithful with his own father. The betrayal cut too deep, and soon his anger turned to a dark resolve. Ahmed knew that the only way to end his pain was through violence. He began to plot a way to confront Tariq, to make him pay for the affair and the damage it had done to his marriage. The plan took shape in Ahmed's mind, growing darker with each passing day. He knew that once he crossed the line into murder, there would be no going back. But the thought of his father and wife together drove him to the edge. On a cold evening, with the tension simmering beneath the surface, Ahmed finally decided to confront his father. He invited Tariq over for a family discussion, but his intentions were far more sinister. As Tariq entered the living room, unaware of the storm about to descend on him, Ahmed's rage boiled over. The confrontation started with sharp words, Ahmed accusing his father of betrayal. Tariq was caught off guard, trying to deflect the accusations at first, but as Ahmed pressed on, revealing the damning evidence, Tariq's demeanor shifted. "I didn't mean for this to happen, Ahmed," Tariq said, his voice shaking with guilt. But Ahmed wasn't listening anymore. Fueled by anger and humiliation, he grabbed the knife he had hidden behind the couch. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, he stabbed his father repeatedly, his world shattering with each thrust. Tariq's eyes, once full of life, went blank as he collapsed to the floor, leaving Ahmed standing over him, drenched in blood and consumed by the enormity of what he had just done. Amina had been in the bedroom when she heard the shouting. Her heart raced as she listened to the escalating confrontation, but she never imagined it would end in violence. When she finally came out, the scene that greeted her was one of horror. Tariq lay lifeless in a pool of blood, and Ahmed stood over him, panting, the bloodied knife still in his hand. Amina's scream pierced the air as she rushed to Tariq's side, but it was too late. She looked up at Ahmed, her face twisted in terror and disbelief. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice breaking. But Ahmed's expression was cold, detached. "You made me do this," he muttered, as if in a trance. "You both did." Amina collapsed to the floor, her mind spinning with the realization that everything had spiraled so far out of control. And now there was no turning back. In the immediate aftermath of the murder, there was only silence. Amina and Ahmed stood in shock, staring at Tariq's lifeless body, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, Ahmed's initial rage faded, replaced by a chilling calm. "We have to clean this up," he said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. Amina, still in shock, didn't respond, but when Ahmed dragged her to her feet, she numbly followed his instructions. Together, they tried to clean up the blood, but it was futile. The stain of Tariq's death was too deep, both literally and figuratively. As they worked, panic began to set in for Amina. She realized that no matter how much they scrubbed, they couldn't erase what had happened. The police would find out, and their lives, as they knew them, were over. It wasn't long before a neighbor, alerted by Amina's earlier scream, called the police. When the authorities arrived at the Khan household, the scene was chaotic. Ahmed was standing in the living room, still in shock, while Amina sobbed uncontrollably in the corner. The police immediately took in the blood-stained room, the lifeless body on the floor, and the knife still in Ahmed's hand. It didn't take long for them to piece together the basics of what had happened, though they had no idea of the twisted motivations behind the murder. Ahmed was arrested on the spot, still too numb to resist, while Amina was taken in for questioning. The investigation began in earnest, and the truth of the affair that had led to the murder would soon be exposed, turning what seemed like a simple domestic crime into a scandal that would rock their community. In the police station, Ahmed was stone-faced during the interrogation. He refused to speak, his mind replaying the events of the night over and over again. Meanwhile, Amina was a wreck. The detectives could see that there was more to the story than just a murder driven by rage, and they pressed her for details. Under immense pressure, Amina began to crack. She told them everything about the affair, the flirtation, how it had spiraled into something uncontrollable. Tears streamed down her face as she described the first kiss, the secret meetings, and the guilt that had consumed her. But she never expected it would lead to this: a murder, a shattered family, and a life forever changed. The detectives listened intently, piecing together the tangled web of betrayal and passion that had led to Tariq's death. As word of the affair spread through the investigation, the media quickly picked up on the scandal. Headlines screamed about the Muslim wife who had betrayed her husband with his own father, and the sordid details of their illicit relationship were splashed across every newspaper and TV screen. The public was outraged, and the family, once respected, was now the center of a national scandal. Friends and neighbors were shocked as they learned the truth of what had been happening behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Ahmed's sister, Layla, felt a mix of disgust and vindication. She had always suspected something was going on, but she never imagined it would end like this. The entire community turned against Amina, and her shame was compounded by the knowledge that her actions had led to such a horrific outcome. The trial was swift. Ahmed's defense team argued that he had been driven to a moment of temporary insanity, overwhelmed by the betrayal of both his wife and father. They painted a picture of a man pushed to the edge by the ultimate betrayal, hoping to evoke sympathy from the jury. But the prosecution was relentless, focusing on the cold-blooded nature of the murder and the premeditation involved in Ahmed's actions. Amina, called as a witness, broke down on the stand as she recounted the details of the affair and the night of the murder. Her testimony, raw and emotional, captivated the courtroom, but it did little to change the outcome. The evidence against Ahmed was overwhelming, and after a tense deliberation, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. When the verdict was read aloud, the courtroom fell silent. Ahmed, once a proud and successful man, was now nothing more than a convicted murderer. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Amina, though not directly responsible for the murder, was condemned in the court of public opinion. She knew that her life as she had known it was over. As Ahmed was led away in handcuffs, he didn't look at her. Amina sat alone, devastated, knowing that her actions had set off a chain of events that had destroyed not only her marriage, but an entire family. The weight of guilt was suffocating, but there was nothing she could do to change the past. Her husband was gone, her father-in-law was dead, and she was left to pick up the pieces of a life shattered beyond repair. After the trial, Amina found herself utterly alone. Ahmed was in prison, and Tariq was dead. Her family disowned her, refusing to speak to the woman who had brought such shame upon them. The community, too, ostracized her, and wherever she went, she felt the weight of their judgmental stares. She moved out of the family home, unable to bear the memories of what had happened there. In her small, rented apartment, Amina spent her days in isolation, haunted by the affair and the murder that had followed. She replayed every moment in her mind, wondering if there had been a way to stop the inevitable destruction. But the truth was undeniable. She had made choices, and those choices had led to tragedy. There was no undoing what had been done. Years passed, but the scars of the affair and the murder never healed. Amina lived a life of quiet penance, trying to find solace in religion, but the guilt never left her. She prayed for forgiveness, but deep down, she knew she could never truly forgive herself. Ahmed remained in prison, serving his life sentence, and they never spoke again. The love they had once shared was now a distant memory, buried beneath layers of betrayal and violence. Amina's secret affair with Tariq had not only led to the destruction of her marriage, but also to the death of a man and the ruin of an entire family. In the end, she was left with nothing but regret, a cautionary tale of how passion and deceit could unravel lives and lead to the darkest of outcomes.